I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a bit of a time, and I always forget that I should be on the other side. CJ, have patience with me. It's pure vanity. Pure vanity. I want everyone to see me first, and then see CJ second. But anyway, thanks for joining us. It's been a bit of a time since we've had kind of one of these more political, worldly discussions, but I think it's important. I think we're getting to a time, especially of the year, where these conversations are starting to come up a lot. Conversations about voting, which I want to talk about hopefully next week. Conversations about politics and dictatorships and authoritarianism and gun rights. We want to talk about gun rights. And we're gonna have some nuance in there too. We're gonna talk about gun rights. We're gonna talk about 2A, but more importantly, the roles that someone who has guns or doesn't have guns needs to fill anyway. How do men build a society, be it again armed or not armed? And it's a really interesting discussion as we get going. Everyone, please know now, CJ and I are not experts. We're not moral authorities. We're two guys having a conversation about something we find interesting and something we find important. So keep that in mind. We're just having a talk here. We could be wrong about some things. We could be right about some things. Just keep that in mind. Please don't burn down the house if we say something that you don't like. There are going to be some things that I know some people are really 2A. There are big 2A people in the US, and I'm not totally 2A, but that's what I want to talk about. So CJ, where do we want to start? And I think you said before the show, maybe the best is literally just to read what is the Second Amendment. I mean, you want to start there?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Second Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights, which is the first, after states came back from, and they were showing the Constitution around the first rounds of presenting the Constitution. They're like, well, we want some more guarantees for the people. And the Second Amendment is stated thusly: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's all the Second Amendment.
That's pretty incredible. And that, right. So as our founding fathers of the US, and by the way, yeah, I'm just showing some love to my home country here. And the interesting part of that, I think, is the first part is that the militia, because I think that's something that we almost even laugh at, right? People are like, oh, militia. Oh, look at these militia. I think down in the South or Texas, you do have some militias. And the
I was going to
idea,
get into that.
yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's like, okay, yeah, go ahead. I mean, why? What on earth is a militia? Why does it exist?
So most people today, and even me to an extent, just reading about this the past couple of years, do not know or understand what a militia is. I'll be trying. I got a little notes here. Militia is not the federal military. Is the federal military, Army, Navy, Marines, all that is not contingent or not necessary in the Constitution or anything. It's contingent upon whether Congress and the people want it at any given time. It wasn't originally supposed to be a standing army necessarily, if unnecessary. That was all. It's just kind of all been built upon our laws and stuff that we have this military with its massive, huge budget. Right. It's not a state National Guard. A lot of people think is that. It's not a police force, and it's also not necessarily, not that there's anything wrong with it, but when you're talking about those Southern militias or the ones that either are in good faith or the ones that kind of get branded as extremist or whatever, it's not those either, because it's a well-regulated militia. We can get into that a little bit. Well-regulated means by the state, not the federal government, but a government agency like your county or your state. It's regulated to an extent that it answers to someone. It's not just well-regulated, meaning, well, we have this very responsible group of individuals who don't answer to anybody, but they're very responsible. They have firearms training. That's not what well-regulated means. So most people, when you get into the people that are really anti-2A, they think, well, we already have a militia, we have a National Guard, or we have an army, or we have the police. And none of those things are, in the founders' time, what they understood a militia to be, which back then states actually had militias and stuff. I didn't do enough research this week to know if any state has kind of a militia type organization at the moment, but those aren't it, and neither are kind of the ones you hear about in the news.
And so what is a militia then? if it's not. So it sounds like it is state-run military force. Yeah.
It kind of seems like a foreign thing, but it's just basically every able-bodied citizen. The closest comparison would be like a volunteer fire department. Even though when I was reading into it, it wasn't voluntary back then. You could opt out of it, but it's basically, people like, this is my responsibility. If something happens, like, I think about back in the Midwest, in very rural areas, there's a volunteer fire department. And it's not just going to be those people on the volunteer fire department. If there's a big fire, some farmer's going to volunteer his tractor to make a trench line, and some people's wives are going to, bring some food out and stuff like that. That's kind of what a militia is, except it has some sort of guidelines and it answers to somebody either in your state or your county or some sort of organization like a sheriff's department or something.
But much more local, obviously, than federalized, because I mean, as far as I kind of understand militias, part of the point is to be able to defend yourself against a dictatorship or an authoritarian government, right? So I guess it is, and again, it's one of these funny things when you start looking at the past of the U.S. and think about what it is now, and it's not even, it's so not remotely the same, because the state power was really so much different than it is now. I mean, now it's state power. I mean, what are the states? I mean, sure, there are some little kind of like, pat on the back, powers, but I mean, back in the day, it was there. I mean, the federal government was there just to kind of keep them in line, kind of. There was not all, yeah, exactly. There was not a whole lot of power, and now it's just out run amok. And I mean, I see it even worse here in Europe. But I mean, but it's still it's not the same. And so I guess does it make even almost more sense now than it did then to actually have a militia that is locally based, of able-bodied men who can protect their rights or their welfare from a bad government? I guess it's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a localized bodies, more subsidiarity, which is always a cool term I've come across the past couple of years that I didn't know about, in Catholic teaching and all that. It's well regulated, not by the militia, not by the people that decide to put it together, talking about those southern ones or whatever that comes in the news, but by some sort of authority. Like I don't know how they would do it today, but like a sheriff's department seems like it would be a good thing,
Right.
or some sort of county council or something, mostly free of the general. That's what they used to call the federal government. All able-bodied citizens, but probably would be men in a certain age, and the arms are obtained by the citizenry on the open market.
Interesting. So the guns are privately owned, obviously, but you can't go and start your own buddy's militia. You can't be like, hey, bro, let's go bring our guns and fight against the local government, because that wouldn't be well regulated.
You could, but it doesn't fall underneath the well regulated part.
So it'd be breaking the law, most likely.
I'm not opposed to. There's different words for it in like the preparation community, if you get into that, but people like, okay, if things get bad and there is a emergency, like a natural disaster, or there is some sort of war thing, like we all depend on each other kind of deal. I'm not opposed to that myself, but yeah, it's not you going like, hey, this is happening, we are going to go surround the courthouse till they change their mind or stop doing this tyrannical thing.
Right. But sometimes it sounds like it would be good, though. Obviously, we saw in January 6th what happened then. You try to have a little bit of your own revolt, and it doesn't go well for those who entered the Capitol. And I don't think either of us are promoting rebellion. It's something we actually wanted to talk about too. I think we'll probably get into that, the idea of rebellion and revolution. That our country was founded on maybe a moral rebellion. It's definitely a questionable issue, because there is a big point and emphasis from the Catholic Church that you should not rebel against a legitimate authority, if you like it or not. If you don't like the authority, doesn't matter. You have to obey them as long as it's not sinful. Now, it does come to a point where it's tough to say, okay, when you start to be, they start really coming after you and really attacking your morality or your family or your safety, then okay, maybe you can rise up. But it's a question. It's a question now. I'm sure it's probably going to be a question in the future. I hope not in the near future. I mean, what does that mean? When is it okay to stand up and to say, hey, I've got enough guns to be a problem?
I think that's if when you find your guest for your election thing, I think that's part of it too. is it a legitimate, authority and stuff? Are you participating in something that's good, or are you participating? There's been a lot of talk the past couple years with participating. By participating, you are making compromises. They always say or when I was younger, I was taught, or it was common discourse to say it's okay to choose the lesser of two evils.
Right.
It's not a lot of the times, but we've been conditioned to think that. But yeah, when it's okay, I guess, is if they talk about, well, you have to have a chance to actually win, right? That's part of it, and part of it is defending innocent lives. So without getting into more scenarios, it kind of be like a case by case basis, because you gotta, like, is it martyrdom, or is it, can we do something, actually change something, and I protect my family and change course and provide normalcy for them?
It's a really good point. And I mean, two things that I take from that is, one, the legitimacy of a government. I mean, were the Caesars legitimate? I mean, I guess in some ways, yes, but I mean, they weren't elected or anything. They were more monarchical, I suppose. But I mean, I guess they were going around killing people and and murdering thousands of Catholics, and still the Catholics gave unto Caesar. So I think it's a tough line, and that's where I've actually kind of changed my mind a bit on 2A. I think, at least I'm not as sure as I used to be, because I think about it, these martyrs from some, say, 300 AD, when Diocletian was coming after them, was their response to say, hey, okay, let's arm ourselves and let's defend ourselves and defend our rights? No, their response was maybe to hide and then to die, and I know that it's a different type of persecution. I totally understand that, but it's an interesting thought. And so I think the thought again, what is a morally justified rebellion? And I think we got to really think about that. But again, having guns is not necessarily a rebellion. I mean, having guns is, of course, I mean, I'd say, I'm sure you would agree, it's mostly safety, protecting your family. I mean, if you're out in the boonies, you're protecting your family from, I don't know, bears. I mean, so literal, actual things that you need a gun for. But I think the 2A argument often gets into this area of, nope, I've got to have guns to be able to go against my government. And what do you think about that? Is that right?
Yeah, I wonder about that too, because you have something like the Diocletian persecutions, which I don't know enough about to, if we were just that much of a minority, or if it was just like, the strength of the faith, that I'm going to bear witness to it for the sake of your soul, the person that's going to kill me, because that's more important, or that's just more important than preserving my life or my family's life at this point, because that's, the will of God, versus something like the Cristeros Wars, where there was lots of martyrs in that too, but they also fought back against the Mexican government.
But they weren't publicly supported by the church. It's another good
I
point,
didn't
though.
know
The
that.
Cristeros
I
weren't
did not
supported.
know
Yeah.
that. See, I didn't know that.
So they, I mean, I don't think they weren't, and I don't know a lot of the history, but I know that they were not publicly supported, because the church has such an issue when you back a certain movement. I mean, if the church backs the Cristeros, and the Cristeros a communist government, and then the Cristeros be worse than the communist government, then the church is left holding the bag of supporting a really bad movement, or what turned into it. So you see why the church doesn't get involved really politically, because it's just a really dangerous game. So you can say, the church will say communism is evil, you cannot be part of it, socialism, Nazism, of course, and they will comment on that, but they will very rarely comment on the other side, because rebellions, look at, we talked about before the show, look at the French Revolution. I mean, these people who rebelled, of course, I think we would agree that it wasn't just, but let's even say it was a just rebellion. What happened after they took power? They went and killed everybody. I mean, they were way worse than any of the rulers before. And I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with that. So rebellion is a dangerous thing.
It is. And I was going to think, what were we talking about? Setting up my thing about the Cristeros. And just like, what are the 2A? The 2A, you talk about forbearance. It could be, just the right to defend yourself,
right,
from unjust. Can you defend yourself from unjust persecution, from, like, say, just criminals, or another country, or your own government, if it's unjust? Can you do that without it being a rebellion? So we have these different touchstone incidences, like Ruby Ridge or those ranchers from a couple years ago where they had some disagreement with the government, the Bundys or whatever. Like, is that justifiable to an extent to use firearms? It's a whole quagmire. Like, where do you draw the line? Are you going to? You can go through it in the courts, or you say no. This is you make yourself the own arbiter. Like, I do not want to do that. I don't think I'll get a fair shake. Or in some of those incidences, the government in this, I don't want to just focus on your own government oppression, but in those incidents I mentioned, they were kind of the aggressor and they came at the citizens. So there wasn't maybe a chance for the citizens to try and resolve that civilly.
Well, and I think you make a good point that, I mean, it is a protection against invasion. That's true. I mean, I think it was during, I don't even remember where, but there's some quote from someone at some time that said that they would not invade the US because there's a gun behind every blade of grass, right? I don't remember which war that was from or who said it, but it's a good point. And so, I mean, first of all, America's too big. You just can't invade America. But, even if you had that idea, let's say America is just run by absolute idiots, which, well, probably is. But, either way, that being the case, I mean, say Russia or China or whoever gets into their heads, hey, wow, yeah, I'd love to take over America because it's the heartland of the world. They just wouldn't do it. I mean, they just wouldn't do it. I mean, maybe sure you could go take over California or New York, but you get to the Midwest and you'd have hundreds of thousands of guns brought up against you, and that's a good thing. I think that is a good thing that America is very well protected by itself, and I think that's a really solid argument in my opinion. But in today's modern war, it's almost kind of like, is anyone going to actually invade anybody? But then Russia invaded Ukraine, so it's like, okay, yeah, maybe they will.
Yeah, it still happens. You wonder, like,
yeah,
the land wars still happen? Yeah, they do.
Yep. But
and I think that kind of gets into our. Sorry, were we gonna say?
No, go for it.
I think that kind of gets into the other thing. The thing when we talked about, you pitched the 2A idea a couple months ago, and I thought about it, and then I came back to you with this: is does it matter that we all have guns,
right?
If we don't know our responsibilities behind them? And I'm not talking about this liberal, like the leftist kind of sense of, oh, you have these responsibilities to be, safe with your gun or whatever, not let them get into criminals' hands, because that's just the basics. If you go to any hunter's course or a firearms course, yeah, you're safe with it. We don't want criminals having firearms, but they do, because that's just the way it works. Bad guys get a hold of weapons.
Yeah.
But that people don't understand that, say, there is a disaster and lots of desperate people want your stuff, or that there is some sort of war, or that there is some sort of persecution against you, that it's not just you and all your neighbors certain people are going to show up one day with guns and there'll be a firefight or something, and the people maybe it might back off. It's that these things, they don't understand war. They don't understand that it's not just a day-to-day thing. It's like you need food. You need to know not just how to fire a gun. You need to know first aid, and that it's not a one-way firing range, that people get hurt, and that, you can't just go live out this firefight fantasy because people are going to get hurt. People are going to die. You're going to run out of food. You're going to need places to sleep. And it's all these, and that's just a more general thing. If you need a community, you need a basic civil, it's a big blanket topic, but a civil responsibility. How does that work before you get to the point where you have to use your Second Amendment rights? Showing up at school board meetings, showing up at county meetings, having an actual community with people, which is hard in the big cities, but say even rural people don't really. Lots of places still do, but understand, like, how are you supporting each other? There's still lots of examples of that. I remember back home in South Dakota and stuff. But are you tracking what I'm saying?
Totally. 100%. I think you're really right, and I think it really is tracked down to one thing. I mean, and I think you said it first of all when you said that people don't understand war, and it's so true. And I think part of it because they watch movies, they play video games, and it's romanticized in their minds. It turns into this, wow, this is kind of cool, shooting people up and, boom, boom, boom. Oh, this is fun. And then you see, you go see in Russia, and this 29-year-old girl gets blown up in a car bomb, car bomb explosion, and some daughter of some Russian diplomat or whatever. And that's war. That's war. That's the ugly side of war. That's just some innocent, or at least, she didn't deserve to die. That's for sure. No matter what she said or did. She just got blown up in a car. That's the ugliness of war. The women and the children who are persecuted. I've seen women here in my little town who have come over from Ukraine, and whatever you think about the war, I talked to one of these young girls, and she's got to be 16. I don't know how old she is, and I asked her, how are you doing here? And she's like, kind of, okay, I'm okay. And what do you think of it here so far? And she spoke very little English, but she's like, I just want to go home. And she had like tears in her eyes. I just want to go back home. It's like, these aren't people who, they don't want any of this. That's war. War is ugly. As you say, war is terrible. And I think that's the same with life in general. As you say, people don't understand anything outside of their plush little lives. People get really upset when they lose their Netflix password or something. That's reality. People really do. I get upset about little stupid things like that, and when you look at that in the grand scheme of things, as you say, if this actually happens, we're looking at in Germany right now, we could lose our energy, our power this winter. It could be gone. It could be it really could end for at least a couple of weeks. And
yeah,
it's crazy. And we're starting to think, okay, yeah, what do we do? And I think most people, as far as I understand, most people, at least in the cities, are just like putting their feet up and, okay, government, take care of it. Crazy.
Yeah, and that's part of what I want. Another part of what I wanted to bring in was just the fragile state of our world right now, in terms of how our supply lines are just like, we get things when we want them at Walmart. We get our energy, based on these last couple hours worth of demand, and the plants rev up or rev down, or they get this, or we get this shipment in, and it has to come from halfway across the world and stuff. And people don't realize when that all these kinks that have been happening the past couple of years with the barges or the small business shutdowns. I don't know how much that was in Germany, but there's lots of things all over the world just happening. And the Ukraine thing with all of Ukraine's grain, all the different droughts all over the world. When stuff like that hits, and there's unsettlement and violence, that the guns can protect you and protect your stuff, but they don't give you more stuff.
Right.
You have to have a community, have to know how to do things so that you can, fix people. You can grow your own food or have food and all that stuff. And I think I mentioned or not, like, I worked for Bass Pro, the sporting goods store, for about a year, switched jobs last winter, but hearing people say, well, I'm going to stock up on this ammo. We had the ammo shortages like a year or two ago too, but I'm going to get this, make sure we get this. They're not, we'll see such and such Biden or whoever wants to come for our guns, but we'll show them when they do that. It's like, this gun rights thing has been in the news cycle for decades, right?
Right.
Am I right?
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to come for our people's guns like it's presented as do. It's just another tactic to divide people. They don't. If you see these past couple of years, they don't need to take people's guns, because there is, whether a person is enthralled with Fox News or CNN or whatever, they get them agitated and mad about what's going on, but they control people, and people don't feel like they need to do anything.
Right.
Whether you're a very conservative person or a very liberal person, you don't take any action. Not that it has to be violent action,
Right.
But they throw it down the road to the next election or whatever.
Totally.
And it doesn't. People are like, well, the line they cross the sand is when they come for our guns. I think a government, I know you live in Germany, I live over here, but governments, if they play it right, if the government is not a good person, using the media or whatever, they can get the populace to go along with a lot of things. You don't have to.
Look at the IRS issue right now. It's one of those things like, we can talk about the morality of tax and all these, usury and all these different things. But whatever you think about it, the government just, what was it, 80, I think it's like 87,000, or was it 8,000? I don't know, that they just signed on a ton more IRS agents. So what they're telling us is that, yeah, hey, you know what? We're the government. We're going to do whatever we want. We're going to spend all the money, and then you're going to pay for it. And we're going to send out IRS agents with guns who are going to make you pay. And, if you don't pay, then, maybe they'll give you a couple of warnings and they're going to throw you in jail. And that's, so it really does become, okay, and is your line, hey, they're going to come that last time and say, okay, you're coming to prison if you don't pay your bills. Do you shoot them? It's a really, I mean, it's a problem. But I do want to get to your practical solutions, because I know you're on your way to practical solutions. That is exactly what we need. We need solutions to being prepared and being ready to shoot people up because we don't want to pay our taxes. It's tempting. I know how tempting it is. But I want to get back to your practical solutions. But first, we're going to go to the first ever advertisement on the Catholic Family Podcast. So we're going to get right back to CJ and his actions shortly after this quick break.
Hello, my name is Eric Hoyle. Do you have a homeschooled teenager in your family who's lacking motivation and discipline and not making much progress? Or who's doing fine but could do much better with some personal help in math, Latin, music, or writing? If so, my homeschool help service could be the right solution. I'm on call to answer questions, explain things, and review work. Get the benefit of my thousands of hours of tutoring experience for a very reasonable price. To learn more, go to www.hoyletutoring.com and choose homeschool help from the main menu.
All right. Well, I hope that worked for you. I don't know. It's probably my computer just doesn't understand how to run commercials. But anyone who watched that, please, if you're interested in advertising with Catholic Family Podcast, especially Catholic material, Catholic services, rosaries, websites, but it doesn't have to be. It can be other things too. Hey, if you're selling ammunition, that's fine too. We will be willing to talk to people, but we do want to talk to Catholics. If we're going to advertise anything, we want it to be traditional Catholics. Please email me at kevin89davis@gmail.com. And again, let me know if you're interested in advertising with us here on YouTube and our other platforms. So CJ, back to you. So as you say, the problem is people, I think, they're not ready for what's potentially coming. And some people, in order to be ready, just say, okay, if I buy guns, then, then I'm prepared. And I think we both agree that that's, maybe it's a part of an issue. Oh, there goes my camera. It's all right. I'm still here. No worries. It's always something with this. But what do we do to be better prepared? What are some steps we can take to, be ready for bad times?
Yeah. Just want to backtrack a sec because it's where we go back to the communities. You have to support other people in your community, your parish, your town, your apartment, your community, the little suburbs you live in, or the school district you go to. It's were you back in COVID with all this stuff? Were you in support of that person whose business couldn't operate because of all these operations? Did you go to bat for them? Did you try and help them financially by buying stuff via different means, or did you try and go to the county or the state and form some sort of voice block for them to get them some sort of representation, like, hey, this is affecting us, or this is affecting whole communities? And can you do something like that? And there's all other kinds of different issues we can come back to where a government can slowly erode your sense of community or, dependence on other people and make you feel alone. They use the gun rights issue, they use religion, they use abortion, and we divide people. So were you involved enough in your community that you knew this other person was having a problem and you didn't just think about, well, that's the way it's got to be? I think that's a lot of what happens, why things get let slid, because we get conditioned from the news or just our own comfort. Well, they have to suffer because that's the way we got to be. That's the way, can't do nothing about it either because it's justified in our head or because we feel like it's just temporary or something. So I guess what to do. And then there's a big wide range of how communities are formed these days, but know your neighbors, know what's important to you, God and your church and your family. and then, start taking steps to disentangle yourself from the sort of, better word for it, the system, in reasonable steps that you can. You have to be more dependent on people and not on Walmart.
Totally. Or Amazon. That's when
Amazon.
I know anyone who watches this channel knows that I go to bat against Amazon all the time. I just think they're the perfect example. They're the ones, they do provide a good service. I mean, I shouldn't say that. They provide a service well, I should say. They are fast, they're cheap, they're easy. But again, as look at consumerism and the issues thereof. Is it worth it? Why do you do things? Why do you purchase what you purchase? As you said, if there's a mom and pop shop down the street and their bag of chips is 30 cents more than Walmart, understand why. Don't just go and buy the 30 cents cheaper, because that it's like helping the evil empire. I mean, it really is. I mean, and I understand. I've shopped at Walmart, of course, and I used to shop on Amazon. But the point is, I think, as you said, to have this in your mind. I mean, what actually matters is the local companies, the local people. And if you don't go and buy that bag of chips for 30 cents more, then it's only going to be Walmart and Amazon, and then they're going to jack up the prices by 50%. So it's also logical. It is going to impact our pocketbooks eventually. But I think, as you say, you got to really, I think the biggest thing is think about it. Just think about the people around you. That's it. It's really that simple, right? I mean, and yourself. But I mean, what is going on around me? I think people get so involved in the world. I'm so involved in politics in America, and I live in Germany. I mean, I know it impacts me, and you should have some idea. But it's such a good point that I don't know what's going on with my neighbors or my town. And I know everything that's going on in California, and that's pretty ridiculous. But that's what they want. They want this globalized mentality so that you don't look around.
Yeah, because California is going to affect you. California and Ukraine are going to affect you more. It's going to affect everybody, but it'll affect you more if you're utterly dependent on Amazon and
Right.
Walmart and
Exactly.
having to drive, you expecting to be able to commute this far all the time and expecting to be able to get these luxuries, not just, your meats and your rices and your water, but luxuries like the bag of chips and stuff for a certain price. If you determine that, okay, you know what, I'm going to start treating pre-made bakery goods and chips as a luxury, then you're going to appreciate. You go to that local store, you support that butcher or that local bakery for those good cuts and those cakes or whatever. You'll budget that in and do that less, but you'll be supporting them. And it's funny how I'm not trying to make it tangential to 2A. I think it's important for a person to carry if they want to be, or just be responsible for their family. You protect your family, because there's even a Supreme Court ruling or a local something on the circuit that it's not the police's responsibility to protect you. This was just a few years ago. Obviously, they're going to come usually, but we talk about those situations where there's an emergency, some sort of catastrophe with weather or economic problems where there's lots of riots going on. They might not get to you in a time and manner. So just being responsible, and that doesn't have to involve being a firearm, but that's part of why the 2A is there, is for you to be able to protect yourself, whether it's, your immediate family, your town, your state, your country. So being involved in your community and then starting to build out, okay, am I responsible for my family? Do we have, more than a day's worth of groceries in our house? And these, I don't want to talk about it too much because it can get overwhelming, but you don't have to be a doomsday prepper or something, but just being responsible for yourself so that if something happens, you're not looking for other people to come save you. You can take care of your family and then maybe be able to take care of your elderly neighbor or your family down the street and stuff. And I think that's kind of this goes from 2A to kind of this prepper culture that you see in America, or not. It's not even prepper culture, but it permeates into a lot of conservative kind of people and mindsets, is looking out for you, because of the sort of reactionary nature of everything we see going on in our country and our schools and stuff.
No, and it's smart, and I think that in a perfect society, I mean, I look at the funny thing is I think that maybe the right form of government is socialism, but and a very important but is that I mean, if you look at the times of like Christendom, as far as I understand it, say the feudal times, and you'd have a local region that was ruled by a duke or a king or a lord or whatever, and he was paid tithes and all whatnot. So it was a monarchical system, and a lot of the care in the society, the hospitals, the schools were supplied by the Catholic Church. So the church was supplying these things through a social system. So the people in the society understood that in order for my society to work, I have to give to the church and give a lot to the church in order for the society to run, because they are the ones who care for all of these other things. And it worked. And it worked brilliantly. But you know what's wrong with it is that the people at the top don't get rich because the money is funneled through a moral Catholic guide. And so why do so we see now, and nowadays, socialism is obviously frowned upon, and rightly so, as it's become, the socialism that starts from the state, because the state is
secular
corrupt.
I think you need to
Right.
people backtrack, but if they know what you're talking about. You're talking about Christian charity through the monarchical church in subsidiarity to where it needs to go versus secular socialism a la Marx and Lenin and all that, where it's not charity, it's compulsory redistribution.
Right. And it just doesn't work, as we've seen many times. I mean, because if it's redistributed, most people just aren't going to work. And it's an interesting thing here in Germany that is a quote unquote, I think, democratic socialism. And it actually still kind of works because the Germans have a working culture. I don't really know how it works, but it does. And it is a fairly good system. I know most Americans would slap me for saying it, but it's true. I mean, the education is free or practically free, and the healthcare is also very cheap. And those are things that, before I came here, I was like, now, come on, socialism is always bad. But, they get those right here. They are better. And I can say that. I've lived here for 7 years or 6 years now, and it is a better system for me. But there are flaws, and there are flaws in that, eventually they're running out of kids. No one's having babies anymore. And now they're going to have a bunch of old people, and they have a bunch of immigrants, and none of them are going to work. And so eventually it's going to crash, and it must crash. And the question is, when is it going to crash? But at the moment it works. But anyway, I mean, we're getting off into socialism versus, whatever else. But I think anyway, the idea, of a society that is based on charity, but I think it wasn't just charity though. It was practicality. You knew it's just how things work. You needed to be part of this symbiotic relationship with the people in your culture. If you were richer, then you did give more, I'm sure. And if you did give more, you would give more to the church, and then the church would pray for you and pray for your salvation. And so you almost were you weren't paying your way to heaven, but there was a relationship that worked. And I think that now it's just completely gone. Yeah, right. But now, it's all run from the top. Obviously, it's all top down. And as you say, we can't really trust anybody but ourselves, because the people at the top, they don't have why do they care about their people? The only reason they would care is if the people rise up against them. I mean, I think that's the truth. And it's happened time and time again throughout history.
Yeah. And we're so many first world countries. We are so even there is lots of bottoms set to drop out at some point. You don't know if it's months or years from now for Germany or the US or Russia or China. They all have their different things going on. Their different, their age demographics, like you guys in Germany or lots of European countries and China, especially. Those things are going to drop out at some point because they're not having families. And there's other different economic factors. Dang it, these train tracks, they go off, and then
That's all right. For me, I enjoy it because conversations go, they go off onto important topics. But it is, but I mean, again, kind of where we've been based on here is the idea that we had to care for ourselves because the government's not going to care for us, but care for those around us because, we are Catholics, and we need to have our heads on a swivel and to understand that most people aren't prepared. And so as you say, especially when you're rural, when you're in a city, honestly, get out of the city. I mean, and that's about all I can tell you. If you're going to be in a city when the world collapses, you get out as quick as possible, because people in the city are going to have no idea what to do. You're not going to have any clean sources of water, etc. So I'd say definitely that's my advice. I'm not an expert, but I'd say get out of the city. But if you're rural, it's just practical. We have farmers down the street who have milking cows, and you know what? You know what they're going to need when they don't have electricity? Hypothetically, they're going to need people to milk the cows. And you know what you can get paid for that? Well, you're going to get milk and butter and cheese. And it's kind of a beautiful thing. I mean, you look at our system now, our monetary system, even it's such a disaster that maybe going back to a barter system of, hey, I work for you and you give me some of the food. It makes a lot of sense. So, but you got to know these people first. To your original point.
Yeah, I know it's a tricky balance, because we talk about one thing, and if we frame it, you can frame it two ways. It's the same. You can frame it the same way, but it's two different things. Like, I want us to be individualized and prepared, but I also don't want us to be in the negative sense where we only think about ourselves.
Right.
You also have to be responsible for yourself so that you can help others. Because, in an extent, you need guns to protect yourself and your stuff, because you have a right to your life, and to a certain extent, a right to your stuff, because you need that for your life, right? So you're not alone, in many different military people, economic people, the kind of prepper communities that don't live in cities, because there's a guy named TJ Morris, who runs it's called Bear Independent. It's kind of like a homesteading channel. He's got good stuff, but he's like a Seventh-day Adventist stuff. So I kind of just scroll past when he gets into his Bible interpretations, because usually it's solid, but then it goes off. But he says, are you an importer? Talking about your home economy. Are you an importer or an exporter? Not are you producing stuff, or are you just buying stuff? Because you can get into this mindset where you're like, I just need all this stuff, not just in a material sense, but for that preparedness sense, versus, what can you make and do for your community? And that is why when you talk about getting out of the cities, because everybody in the cities, they just buy stuff. It's just kind of the function of when you live in a small house or an apartment, is you go to an office job or something. That's where the cities are made to do. So you don't really make a lot of stuff or contribute a lot of stuff other than your time to your community.
Right. Yeah. And it's a dangerous place to be for many different reasons. So again, I'm not an end of the world type of a guy. I think that we are headed for some very serious issues and I think issues you can very legitimately say are likely, like the food crisis. I mean, when you have droughts and when you have issues in Ukraine, and I know people having issues getting enough, not manure, but the stuff you spread on the fields. Anyway, fertilizer. Thank you. Yeah, the fertilizer. You're not getting enough of that, and people laugh at me when I bring that up. And I say, one of the biggest issues is fertilizer. And yeah, come on, Kevin. That's stop talking about your poop and stuff. It's like, no, it's seriously. I mean, if you can't put fertilizer, then you can't grow enough plants, or you can't grow them bigger or whatever. And that's a big problem. And it's really with the energy crisis too. I mean, I think in the U.S. you're much better prepared, but we have a bunch of idiots who've been running our country for the last forever. I mean, pretty much. I mean, 60 years, I suppose. And it just decision after decision is worse and worse. And it looks like, there are big issues, and some people really need to start thinking these things through. And again, don't panic. I'm not saying go sell your house in the city. But the point is, think about it. I just kind of have a thought of what is going around and what will happen if the power goes out. I really think that through. I mean, if the power goes out for 3 days, if the power goes out for a week or a month, what does that mean? And I think if you at least have it on your mind, and for goodness sake, I mean, this has been a real big topic lately. And I know you watched the video from Father Zepeda about the men's group in Denver. A fantastic video. I highly recommend anyone to watch it. It's really fiery, gets you kind of riled up. But I think these men's group are so important to be able to, just have a chat with other guys who know things that you don't know. And maybe you know things they don't know. You can bring skills that they don't have, and you get this bonding. I mean, from guys that maybe you only see once every month at church or whatever. I can't recommend that enough. Anyone who can get together with men at church. I mean, church is the ideal. If you can't get them at church, then go meet with your neighbors, and you be the one who's proactive. Knock on their doors and say, "Hey guys, you come over for a beer, let's just have a chat about, hey, what happens if the electricity goes out? I think that's a really good idea.
And I think I'd like to keep talking afterwards if you got time, just because of stuff, but that is a good maybe capstone for as close as we can keep it to the Second Amendment and defending ourselves with what Father Cepeda said. Is it's a man's responsibility, and if we make it specifically about husbands and fathers, is to overcome mortal sin. And what's the responsibility that if you're a husband or a father or a priest is to protect your loved ones spiritually.
Right.
You have, and I have very recent examples of struggling to do this with what you try and keep your kids away from, or teach your kids, or keep protect your spouse spiritually by praying a lot, by teaching them. And men, we need to do that. That needs to be your first thing as a man. And then because if you can do that, and you can be faithful in little things, keeping your kids away from bad content, or just teaching them, or having these hard conversations where somebody says something in public and you have to take your kids away from that or correct them or something. And you can think of all kinds of examples where they say something they shouldn't, or then take the Lord's name in vain, or ask you if you want to come over and partake in this, and you're like, no, we can't do that. But you have to protect yourself and your family spiritually, and grow in faith and prayer, because it's coming to a point, and we're not, we don't want to be doomsayers and naysayers, but things will get harder for all of us, and you will have to protect your family spiritually. Physically. And if you can't do the little things, and they're big things too, with prayer and your morality and your ethics, you are going to make mistakes you'll regret when you have to do things physically. When you have, the world is always asking us to make compromises, even in these really easy times where if we don't make that compromise, it's not that hard of a ramification from it. It might be a slight social ostracization, or a slight increase in expense, or whatever. It's not that hard right now to not make compromises. It will get harder in emergencies, or famines, or wars, or anything that might happen. So I think men, we need to really start working on doing the little things and the big things spiritually, so that we can make the right decisions and be faithful to God physically when bad things happen.
100%. And yesterday was the feast of St. Louis, King of France, and my mom put together a really great video about him, and he wrote a letter to his son, who would succeed him to the office of king, and it's really, really fascinating just to see his strength. And he is a king. This is a guy who went on 3 or 4 crusades. Died while on crusade. Was a very powerful man and a powerful leader. But he got all of that from prayer, and he went to mass twice a day. They said when he was traveling, he would have the monks chanting the holy office around him. That's pretty incredible. That's pretty inspiring to see someone like that. One of the greatest men of all time. Really a manly man, and to see that he got all of that. He got all of that strength from God. But it sounds extreme, but it's so incredibly simple that everything good and strong and pure comes from God. And it's so easy to forget that. We think it comes from us. So we think, okay, we got to be strong. And it's true. We do have to be physically strong, but the physical strength is totally just it's a happenstance kind of that comes from the strength that must come from God. And as you say, if we're not spiritually strong, then we're not going to be mentally or physically. Maybe physically you can probably get away with being, a terrible sinner and away from God and just be physically fit. But as you say, when the time comes and you start having to make really tough decisions, and you have to make decisions of do I compromise? If you have to make decisions of, okay, IRS agents are going to throw me in prison, what do I do? And it's a really legitimate question. If they knock on my door and say, you're going to prison, and I've got 2 little kids, seriously, what do I do? And we have to pray and be strong enough to have an answer, or to have the Holy Ghost give us the answer in those times. So exactly as you say, if we're not ready spiritually, then go home. You're done. But and again, I think that the best ways to prepare for that is on our own. Obviously prayer and work on ourselves. But yeah, get together, get these men's groups to help each other out. Go and get this, yeah, camaraderie and this support. And see that other men struggle, and they struggle with the same issues we struggle with. But that's okay. And then that together we are stronger. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. I mean, it really is true. I mean. We're not meant to be alone in this life. That's why God gave us families and friends, for goodness sake. We're meant to be in this together. And I think that's a cool thing. And it's nice. And it's a nice thing. I mean, I complain about the internet all the time, because I think the internet in many ways is deeply evil, but it's not all evil. It is a tool. And when that tool is used, and I get to meet people like you from Midwest of the US and other people from all over the place, and we get to have good conversations. That's awesome, and take advantage of that. I highly recommend people, hey, if you don't have a big parish, then meet people on Twitter or Facebook or whatever and say, hey guys, can we have a Skype group meeting? Can we just have a Skype chat and let's just chat? Let's what are your thoughts on 2A? Hey, what are your thoughts on if the IRS comes to my door, what do I do? Now, it's probably even better if you have a priest involved, because some of those conversations are going to not have answers that you or I can answer, but these conversations are really important, and they get us thinking, and they get us, if they're on our minds and we've thought them through already, it's going to be easier for us to answer. So I love it.
Yeah,
make it happen.
You should, and it's just, you get scared to meet new people. I mean, and that's just taken for granted. Like, I've moved around so much the past 10 years to different towns. It's hard to make, you got to start over. But I'm sure there are people, you have friends, just get back in touch with them, get closer to them, do some work with them, help them out with things like
Totally.
projects and stuff, and go home. If everybody's all tied away and squared away, go help other people with your friends. Do hard things, hard work that needs to be done that can help.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. That's a really important thing. And that's something I've really seen. And I've got friends like that. They drive me crazy. And it's like, okay, there have been times where I've wanted to ask for help, and I have, and people have come immediately. I've got a great group of friends here in Germany. And they really, I'll have a couple of them just come immediately. And then I'll hear a couple of weeks later that they had some big project that they really needed help for, and I never even knew about it. And it's like, dude, it's like, you make me feel terrible. It's like, I mean, really, seriously. I mean, if you need help in a project, or if you need advice, go to somebody. And really find someone that you trust, that's a good Catholic, that has a good head on their shoulders, and say, hey, I could use some help. And then, you know what? When they need help, you help them. That's exactly right. And it really develops a kind of brotherhood in a good way. I'm not saying a Masonic brotherhood. I'm saying a real Catholic brotherhood of hey, we're in this together. We're going to help each other here on earth. But again, most importantly, we're going to help each other get to heaven. And sometimes, yeah, you maybe need an ear to talk to, or someone to help shovel your backyard. I mean,
yeah, I struggle with asking for help, but we don't know everything. We're not,
totally.
Man, we're not an island and all that. I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the experience or all the tools, or, if sometimes you want to undertake something and learn it for the first time, cool. But if other times you can save yourself a lot of heartache and form very strong bonds with people by asking for help.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right.
Humble yourself and be teachable.
Totally. Well, and I guess I'll end this podcast by saying, if anyone ever wants to help the Catholic Family Podcast, you can always feel free to. CJ has helped us before in the past. I really appreciate the things CJ has done in helping us edit some of our videos as well. My dad does a lot of that stuff too. If anyone has video editing abilities, it's actually something we're really in need of. We really need, because we have content that we are able to make and to steal from the internet, pretty much. Not really steal. We don't really steal. We usually get permission, but we do need some help in video editing. So if anyone has these skills, or heck, if you just have a nice computer and you want to learn these skills, let me know. There are some things I can even help support people in getting programs that can do this. It's really something we're really in need of in order to help grow this channel. The channel is really growing right now. Thank you, Father Dominic Radecki, for your wonderful sermon that has just kind of sent us into the atmosphere all of a sudden. But we do need your help. So please, if anyone has these abilities, especially video editing, let me know. If you have any topics you want to talk about, like this conversation today, let me know. Send me an email, kevin89davis@gmail.com. We're going to talk about voting in the next few days. And is it moral or is it not? And it's a really interesting question, and it's debatable. And you hear different answers, even from clergy. Is it okay or is it not to vote for the lesser of two evils? And when it's framed that way, it's not. But it is a really good discussion. We're going to talk about that. Again, if anyone has any other topics you'd like to talk about or you'd like to hear us talk about, then again, send me an email at kevin89davis@gmail.com. CJ, I really appreciate it. I hope to have you on again. I mean, I hope to get back more into this weekly show where we talk sometimes about these topics that need to be talked about, guns and defending our families and even homesteading and whatnot. I mean, even prepping. I mean, prepping gets kind of a bad name, but the idea of being prepared, I mean, that's a really good, very sound and Catholic idea. And so I think that is very sound. We have a guy from Canada that I hope will also come on for that show to talk about that topic as well. Anyway, CJ, do you have any last words or should we wrap it up?
No, thank you. That was a good talk. Yeah, if anybody wants to edit, it's the stuff that Catholic Family Podcast does. You don't have to, do 16 layers of video and audio. They just need it. Sometimes it's basic kind of slideshow stuff, but you can make it as nice as you want. And
100%.
Obviously they want quality, but it's not hard to make a good video with a lot of the stuff we're doing. It's very easy if you just put the time into it, and lots of people could learn to do that if you're interested in that.
That's exactly right. It needs a little bit of time. The skill is not that necessary. It needs a little bit of time and a little bit of training. But as you say, a lot of it's just on the job. You just kind of throw things together, and then you say throw it. If anyone's ever done a slideshow, then you could do this. 100%. Awesome, CJ. I really appreciate it. Until next time, until the next edit, or until the next show, whenever I see you next. I really appreciate it again, and God bless.
You too, Kevin. Thanks.